Oh, oh, hello.
Mine work. Scott, hers is working.
Okay, I may have to do that. Dead battery. You good? Okay. Evening, everyone. If let's call the meeting to order. I'd like everyone to stand and join me in a pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, tonight's meeting is a special meeting for MRB to make a proposal. Special meeting on water. Since it's a special meeting, there will be no public comment tonight. Paul, if you, it's on you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good. All right. Thanks for having us out tonight. I'm Paul Chatfield, and I'm from MRB Group. And this evening, I brought along Scott Madison, who is one of our project managers, who's been involved with me working on numerous projects for the town of Shelby over the last um, 12 to 15 years. Um, I've been serving in the past as a town engineer since around 2004, I think it was. So about 20 years working on various different projects. We worked on several different water district projects, the salt storage building, um, some work here within the town, various different projects. But tonight, what I'm here to talk about is the water study that was completed in 2020, and really just to bring you up to speed on what what happened from our standpoint of putting together the information for the water study. If nothing more, an educational opportunity to learn a little bit more about the background and the operation of the system, which I think is very important for the board to consider when making any decisions relating to the water system. Okay, so I gave you an agenda, an outline of the things that I'd like to just briefly cover, and then I'll leave it in the end to have questions and answers from the board. But to give you a background of the water study, so the town of Shelby retained MRB Group in May of 2019 to put together the water study. We gathered information. We got water contracts together from between the village of Medina and the town of Shelby. We looked at water rates. We looked at water usage. We looked at existing mapping. Got a very good handle on the things related to the system that had been completed prior to us taking over as town engineer. We had discussions with the town of Shelby, the town of Royalton, Niagara County Water District, who's the ultimate supplier of water. At the time that we were hired in 2019 to evaluate the water system and to do this water study, the goals were to provide water from another source, Royalton, most likely, and not getting water directly from Medina. And for the most part, that was the idea of the study, was to look at providing the entire town of Shelby with water from Royalton. As we went through the study, what we learned was that there are several different pressure zones within the town, and I'll get into that when we talk about the operation of the system. But it's important for you to know that that was the goal, was to provide water to the whole town and not just a portion of it. We prepared the draft study in early September of 2020. We met with the town board at that time. We made a few changes to the report based upon our meeting with the town board in that meeting. Primarily, we increased the rate of $2.25 per thousand of water cost coming from Royalton, and increase it to $4 per thousand gallons. And that was based upon discussions, I believe, that were had with the town, between the town of Shelby, the town of Royalton. The problem at that time was there was no agreement or negotiation that took place to identify what that water rate would be. So from a conservative standpoint, that number of $4 per thousand was used. But I clearly identified in my report that there needed to be more negotiation and discussion between Shelby and Royalton. So how the system operates, it's important for you to know and understand how the system operates and what kind of water pressure that there is in various different parts of the town, because it's different based upon the geographic area of the town. Niagara County Water District and the town of Royalton operate on a pressure zone of approximately 765 feet to 780 feet above sea level. And very simple terms, 780 feet would be the elevation of the ground plus the pressure in the water system to provide water pressure to various different parts in the system. Very simple, and it's like very simple description of it, but we use that above sea level hydraulic grade line as kind of the relative number that we use to compare different areas and different pressures. A certain area that has a lower elevation may have a higher pressure. An area that has a higher elevation, a house that's up on a hill, would have a lower pressure, because that difference between the overflow of the tank or the pressure in the system from their house is reduced. Scott can clarify anything related to that as we go through it. But basically, Niagara County operates on that 765 to 780, depending upon what's going on in their system, what kind of a demand in their system is, what their tank levels are, what pumps are running, whatever's happening in their system, it fluctuates a little bit. It's never right at one level. So when you design a system, you want to design it from a conservative lower standpoint and not from a conservative high standpoint. So if for some reason the water pressure increased to an elevation, instead of 780, it's 785, if that's what it turns out to be, it fluctuates. So you want to make sure that you stay on the conservative side. Shelby operates the water system on 3 separate pressure zones. 765 feet hydraulic grade line, or 765 pressure zone, a 742 pressure zone in a very small portion of Shelby, and then the majority of the system operates on what's called the 858 pressure zone, or 858 feet hydraulic grade line. That pressure is generated from the booster pump station that is just outside the 3 million gallon water storage tank. So water comes in from Medina, comes in on the 24-inch transmission main, serves the village of Medina. Excess water goes to the water storage tank. Water storage tank, water comes out of that, serves back to Medina, also serves the booster pump station. That booster pump station serves the town of Shelby up Maple Ridge Road to East Shelby Road and a little bit area to the east there, and then basically Fletcher Chapel Road and all the way back to the western side of the town. Most of that operates on the 858 pressure zone. One of the things that happens with what we'll call a rural water system, and I've designed millions of linear feet of water main, I'm not joking, over the years in different locations, is that the problem that we have in a rural setting is that the chlorine residual tends to become lower because of the decrease in the water usage. So when we're designing a system, a water main, we're trying to mix the need for domestic usage, your house, your house, your house, and everybody else's house, that's domestic usage, versus fire flow. Our fire flow needs to be high enough to meet the needs of fighting a fire. Minimum fire flow, according to the health department and 10 state standards, is 500 gallons per minute at 20 pounds residual pressure. So if there's a fire, 500 gallons per minute goes to the fire plus the domestic usage. Depending upon how much usage there is from the homes that are in the area, and also the need for determining if you need a higher flow or gallons per minute. 500 is the minimum, but in some areas, if houses are closer together, if there's types of building construction that requires higher flow, then you need to have maybe a little bit of a larger pipe. For instance, on Freeman Road, I believe it was, they need to bring water all the way from the storage tank, all the way around the system, providing pressure to the system, and also meeting domestic needs, fire flow needs. And at the time when that line was designed, and that was designed prior to me becoming town engineer, they chose a 12-inch diameter pipe. And the reason they chose that was to meet the needs of domestic fire flow and also for the farm that was using a lot of water in that area. Well, the farm's not using the water that it was using, so now there's less water being used in that area. This is a problem that we have in almost every rural area, to try and keep the water main size as small as possible so that you don't over store water in the line and create this chlorine residual. So the problem with chlorine residual. So what happens is then you have to flush the lines. So where water's going from east to west, you're having problems with chlorine being still being in the system, so you have to flush water. The problem is that if you switch water from getting water from Royalton, take water from the west and take it to the east, there's going to be other places in the system that will require flushing, just like you might be flushing at the far extremes of the system. So I just wanted to point out why, the concerns that we have with dead-end water mains. Why don't we loop all water mains? Well, because there's some areas that there's just not enough density, or maybe you're at a town line and you don't have the ability to loop a line. But the problem or the concern relating to looping a system is that you can loop the system, but if you don't have the demand at the end of that loop or in the middle of that loop, someplace in that system you're going to have water that's going to be stagnant, that's going to require chlorine, flushing for chlorine residuals. So there's never a really simple answer to it. I mean, this is just information that I wanted to provide to you, because I think it's important, certainly to have the understanding of what it is that you're looking at. Water loss in the town of Shelby, according to our analysis in 2020 was almost 27% water loss in the system. From what I understand from the water that's flushing currently was estimated at about 2.3 million gallons of water flushed per year. If that's the case, if it was 2.3 million gallons of water, that's about 3.5% of the water that is purchased currently from the village of Medina. In 2020, I think it was somewhere around 65 million gallons of water that was purchased, and we were able to determine what that loss was. So for nothing else, if you have 27% loss of water, my recommendation is find the leaks. Do a water leak detection study, find the leaks, and then repair them, and that is going to help to reduce some of your operation costs. In 2020, when we put the study together, one of the things that we identified was the need to provide water to all the people within the town that we could provide from Royalton, and that required going back to the 16-inch transmission main on Griswold Street, install about 9,200 linear feet of 12-inch water main between Griswold and County Line Road, and connect to West Shelby Road. The reason that we chose that particular location was we had planned through the course of the several water districts before this 2020 study came up, is that all the water main on the main feed on West Shelby Road and Fletcher Chapel Road and all the other roads in that area were made 12 inches so that it could serve the entire town. So that's why we chose Griswold Road at that point, because we knew we would need to go back to the 16-inch transmission main to get the proper amount of supply to serve the entire town of Shelby. We needed a pump station. Water came from Niagara County Water District 16-inch transmission main at the 780 pressure zone, or 765 or 780 pressure zone, would come to the town of Shelby. Water would then go into a water storage tank, a ground storage tank, kind of in the same height and configuration as the one on Maple Ridge Road. It was, I think, a 250,000 gallon water storage tank, ground storage tank. And then coming out of that would be a pump station that would pump the water through the system, all the way through the system to the eastern edge of the system at the same pressure, in the same pressure zone that you're currently experiencing. And that was the plan. There was a couple of other small areas that were on the western end of the town that we made a few connections, Saltworks Road and Maple Ridge Road for a very short section. That was to be able to get water to the Furnace Parkway area to serve that instead of serving that off of the Medina system. So at that point, that project was $5,400,000 or something like that, very close to that. Costs have gone up significantly since then. If today you were going to do the same project, and we believe, based upon what we understand of the system, that if you were to serve the entire town of Shelby with water from Royalton, that you would need a pump station, that you would need a storage tank, that you would need to go back to that supply of water all the way back to the 16-inch transmission main. If that's what you wanted to do from the standpoint of a project, that cost of $5,439,000 would probably be 50% higher today, and because COVID, because costs have increased significantly on labor and material and equipment, and a project that you propose in 2024 will probably not get constructed until 2026. maybe even 2027, because, you know, if you're going to try and get grant money for any project, this project or any other project, it all takes time to get through the process. So, Scott, anything you want to add at this point? Okay. All right. So, Scott, Scott and I work on a number of projects similar to this. Water distribution projects, water storage tank projects, pump stations, all, you know, primarily in my 41 years of engineering has been involved in water system improvements for communities. So I looked at the study, I went back. Unless there's something that has changed so significantly that that happened since September of 2020, because we did fire flow tests in August of 2020. It would have to be very significant. And the conversations that I've had with Brian Cummings from Royalton in the last week, and conversations with the representatives of the Niagara County Water District, is that there hasn't been significant changes in the system from an operational standpoint. That kind of leads me to the last thing I want to just touch on is grants and loans. So the grants and loans associated with water projects in general, and I'll talk kind of in general terms, and then I'll talk specifically about this project. There's 3 or 4 programs that are really available. The first one, and I gave you some information on that, which you can take and read at your leisure later on, but the basic idea or the premise behind it is USDA Rural Development is a federal agency. They provide grants for water and sewer type projects, and also public building facility projects. The town of Shelby has used USDA Rural Development on several projects over the years. They're a great resource for providing funding for projects. Dependent upon the income level of the town, you would fall in what's called the poverty level. And on a project that you're going to do that has health and safety issues, you'd have to do some water testing and determine and prove that there's health and safety issues, so that you could get the lowest funding possible and the highest percentage of grant, up to 75%. That's for a general water project. We looked at doing a water project. Oh, geez, when was it, Scott? Maybe 3 or 4 years before COVID, 2017, something like that. Over on the eastern edge of the town, east of East Shelby Road, there was a bunch of roads that went over to the town of Barry. That's a distribution type project. We looked at it at the time, and it really didn't go any further because of the cost at the time and the grants that were available. But a project like that, if you were going to provide water supply to a new area, first place that I would say is you go and you talk to USD Rural Development and see if they would be able to provide the funding. 75% if you can determine that you have a health and safety issue. There's problems with wells, there's quality issues, there's quantity issues, things of that nature. If a project like this, serving water to supply a community that already has a water supply that is a good water supply as far as quality and quantity, you'd have to determine somehow that there was a health and safety issue to get any funding from a poverty standpoint. And if that's the case, that you don't have a health and safety issue, rural development may either not provide funding for it, either in the form of loans, but the interest rate would be significantly higher. So from the standpoint of this particular project, supplying an alternate location to get your supply, I think you would have a hard time getting funded from USD Rural Development in the form of grants. The Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, WIA. You'll hear people talk about WIA grants, WIIA. that program, again, is a highly competitive type program. That application is due June timeframe, right? Through the consolidated funding application. Again, that's a highly competitive program. They will provide up to 60% grant. But the likelihood of getting a grant from WIA for a water supply switching from one source to another, or not even it's the same source, a different location, would be not a high likelihood, because they tend to look for projects that have water quality problems, emerging contaminants, storage type issues that, if a community has problems with storage. Which then kind of leads me to the next thing, which is the USDA Rural Development Pre-Planning Grant. Okay? The that's okay. Yep. Yep. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. I'll be glad to answer as many as I can. USDA Rural Development has a pre-planning grant which provides up to about $30,000 of funding for doing like a deeper analysis of a project of this nature. They'll provide up to 75% grant, right? So you get a $30,000 grant, you need to come up with $7,500 for the town's portion. That would be that was the handout that I gave you, which was the pre-development planning grant. Yep. It's this one here that has the blue. Yep, pre-development planning grant. Yep. So that would be an opportunity, but there's always problems with these things, or strings attached, right? There's never just a free thing. Like, you'll get these messages from the senator or the assemblyman, and they'll say, we got lots of money. There's a lot of money available. Well, there's a lot of reasons that they have to have you go through all the hoops to make sure that you're following the requirements that not the assemblyman or the senator, but the people that are having these grant and loan programs that are administering it, that they have to follow certain criteria. One of the hooks with the pre-development planning grant might be, how much money do you have in your water account, and do you have enough money in your water account to pay for whatever study that you're going to do? And they may look at that and say, yeah, you know what, we're not going to give you a grant. So there's never a guarantee. If anybody comes in and tells you you got a high likelihood of getting a grant, I think that's just just not right. You have to go through the process if you decide you want to apply for grants. At MRB, we have a grant writer, grant administrator on site. We have a couple of folks that work in that department writing grants. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I never take a client down the primrose path of, it's going to be great, you're going to get this and that. There's always work that has to be done to get a grant. But what I like from our grant writers is they'll tell us straight up, I think you have a really good shot at this, or I don't think you have a really good shot. And without going into great detail, I mean, from what they've told me at this point, is that we don't think that, it would be wise at this point to proceed haphazardly or quickly to get into this, this WIA program at this time, with what we believe is not a high likelihood of getting funded at this point. But that's not to say that it couldn't happen. You could proceed ahead, do an application, and you could be pleasantly surprised and get get funded. So, Scott, you've dealt with a lot of this, these types of projects. Anything else to add related to grants?
As Paul kind of outlined, we're seeing, if you want to be competitive with WIA, you need to be addressing emerging contaminants.
Oh yeah, come on up here.
Yeah, Yeah, so if you want to be competitive for WIA, you need to be either addressing emerging contaminants, or you need to have some kind of consent order from the DEC or the Department of Health. You already have a problem that needs to be solved. You guys currently don't fit that situation. You basically want to switch from your source of water to this exact same source of water. You just want to switch who you're paying for that exact same source of water. So probably not something that's going to be competitive from a WIA standpoint.
And while you're up here, I'd like you to just touch base on the change in the pressure and the impact of.
Yeah, so we talked about, we've looked at the change in the pressure without a much deeper look into it. There's no way to say for sure that you can't connect directly to Royalton and satisfy the Department of Health, which their minimum is 35 pounds of static pressure in all locations at the water main. It's possible that you could achieve that with the lower hydraulic grade line. The problem is you're probably going to lose somewhere around 40 pounds in all locations in what we're calling the 858 hydraulic grade line. That's a tremendous amount of pressure for people that are probably used to the pressure they currently have. It also could make a tremendous difference in the fire flow in those locations. So, I mean, without a serious hydraulic analysis, there's no way to say for sure one way or the other, but it was not something that I would take lightly. It's something I would want to take a very hard look at.
Okay. All right, so I'd like to answer any questions that the board has. No, that's okay.
We do have an area, if in part of this project we wanted to add some new lines in, we have a couple roads that don't have water right now.
Yep.
They're having well problems to the point where they're actually going to other locations and trucking water back to their homes.
Mhm.
Would that put us into one of these grants that you said we might not be eligible
they-
for?
So as far as distribution in a situation like that, you would be a great candidate for USDA Rural Development Grant.
But only for that section versus if they we wanted to make it part of the
That's-
big project.
That's a question I think we need to ask Rural Development.
Okay.
Is we're solving a health and sanitary issue with a portion of this project, while we're also including a portion that's not solving that. Do they consider the overall project? Have we met that requirement, or have we not? I can't say for sure right now. It's something I think we would need to take to them, but.
Okay. And then my other question would be, so you talked about a water tank and pumps. You said, I think I just understood you to say that it's possible without further investigating. I guess it's possible you could get by without them. But what happens if there's somewhere in that whole thing, there's a water main break or a leak or something?
So
How much does that affect things that would, how drastically would that affect your fire flow?
very drastically, to the point that if you don't have a storage tank storing water, you could end up with a water main break along that section of 12-inch water main that we have proposed. The town now has no water, completely out of water. If you only have that single connection with no storage, it's possible.
Yeah, I think that would all require further analysis. If you make the switch, would you keep the water supply available from the 3 million gallon storage tank and the booster pump station? I mean, those would be part of the further analysis that would be necessary.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so in the beginning, I think you spoke a little bit about why you went to West Shelby. Why not Johnson Road and Freeman Road, I guess, here in
Yep.
Medina? Like, because we're already kind of, and one of those roads we're connected already, right? And the other road, it's my understanding that it's just an under-the-road push of a pipe, and we could end up being connected there. So why are you not looking there?
Yep, because we did fire flow testing on Freeman Road, and then what's right adjacent to that? Is that Mountain Road, turns into Mountain Road?
Yes.
Right. Freeman Road, Scott and I were out, both of us did the fire flow test on that. We did a fire flow test there. We did a fire flow test on Chestnut Ridge Road, at County Line Road. And the information that we had available from the standpoint of fire flow, let me just grab this here, was that we didn't feel that we, first of all, would have enough water to get into the town of Shelby on a routine basis, that we would need to go back to the 16-inch transmission main, because that's where there's I would call it an ample source of water. So I did highlight in my review that I looked at today, just going back, just refreshing my memory on this, because it's been 4 years. Is that at Mountain Road and Freeman Road, we had pretty good fire flow right at that point. But our pressure was in that 780-foot pressure zone, so we knew we were going to have to pump up. And we felt, based upon our discussions with Niagara County Water District, who was the supplier of it, that we needed to go back to that 16-inch transmission main. Now, initially, we thought all along that we saw the fire hydrant on Chestnut Ridge Road at County Line Road in Royalton. That'd be a great spot. That's an 8-inch diameter pipe, and that had a fire flow of 818 gallons a minute at 20 pounds pressure. So we went back to the 16-inch transmission main, looked at that, did a fire flow on that brand new 16-inch transmission main in 2020, and we had 2,427 gallons a minute on that line. So we felt like it was imperative to make sure that we had the best supply of water getting to the town of Shelby, and that's why we chose to go back to the transmission main, put a 12-inch main, bring it into the 12-inch main, which was kind of the center of the Shelby water system, right? Right at the center. So if you're coming from the center and you've got 12-inch pipe on West Shelby Road heading to the east, all the way to the east, that's the best system that you're going to have, because it's going to have the most direct route to serve the whole system and then fan out from there.
Right, and another to that point is, you can make all three of those connections, but you're not going to install 3 separate pump stations all those places. So if you're going to maintain the current 858-foot hydraulic grade line, you want to take the best source of water, or the best source flow of the water, which is the transmission main. It's probably almost impossible that you could take that 800 gallons a minute of fire flow and get it all the way to the east side of Shelby and still maintain 500 gallons a minute. The friction loss of the pipe, it's not going to do it. So, yeah, if you're going to pump it, you're not going to install 3 pump stations. You're going to take the best source.
And there's no way to get around having to put in the pump and the tank.
That's kind of what we're saying, is we don't know that 100% for sure, but that's a tremendous pressure loss to go from 858-foot hydraulic grade line to somewhere around 765. I mean, you may be able to meet the Department of Health 35 PSI minimum standard, but you're going to lose 40 pounds in all locations average. And not only do you have that pressure loss, but you're going to have quite a loss in fire flow as well.
Yeah. What he means by that, somebody who has 80 pounds of pressure in their house, by switching to that lower pressure zone, is going to go from 80 to 40 pounds of pressure. That's a huge decrease. People, it's not just going to be they're going to notice it. They're going to be like, something's not right. Now, if you have a well and you're out in the middle of no place, if you have 45 pounds of pressure, and that's fine, right? I mean, you get used to it. But if you have people that go from 80 to 40, even if you had people that drop 10 pounds of pressure, people would notice that. And that's why, as Scott said, before you proceed with any detailed plan, is you need to, really further investigate the whole concept of making that switch. Besides the fact that there are places in Shelby that we wouldn't be able to serve from that pump station, because, there's water services that are off the transmission main, and there's areas that are kind of on the north of Maple Ridge road that are served, you know, off of the transmission main with a pump station. So, as I said in my report, it's not a simple turn the switch. I think, you know, I just think that, you know, that you need to just understand everything that's involved with it, you know, as you make a decision to move forward with it.
Right. Just making those connections there is not going to entirely take you away from buying water from Medina. You're still going to have people that are on the transmission main on 31, and you're still going to have all the areas north of 31 that are fed from Medina, unless you're willing to go in and install a redundant water main on the other side of the road and make that connection under 31 in all those locations.
I got a question. The goal's never to disconnect from Medina.
Okay.
We're gonna cross supply, that's the goal. Because our biggest dump is Freeman Road. If we're not dumping 2.5 million gallons off of Freeman Road, because we have fresh chlorine coming in, we're not losing parts per million, we're gonna save money for the taxpayers. We have the tower, we have Freeman, and if we connect that West Shelby Road, the 12-inch, where that main's coming in, off of their 8-inch, even if it's off of their 8-inch, isn't it better to have both lines coming in? We have a backup water supply besides the main water supply.
Sure.
And the taxpayers are cutting their bill almost in half.
Yeah, but in that situation, you absolutely have to pump, because if you're going to still take the water out of the tank from Medina, you're not going to reduce the hydraulic grade line there. You're going to continue to pump that water.
Yeah.
So you either need to pump when you do connect to maintain the same hydraulic grade line in both locations to mix the water, or you're going to have to separate those areas with a PRV or something to that effect, and now you're just creating another dead. You're getting rid of one dead end to create another one in a new location.
So keep doing the study that we want to do, to run all the tests on this before we do anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's okay. I wanted to make sure. Okay, but this is feasible doing it this way, but have the study done to make sure before we do anything.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
what I think when we showed up here, we were kind of unclear on exactly.
Yeah.
We didn't exactly know that the goal is to create a second
Well,
source
it's
of water.
to save the taxpayers money, and if we can't do it with just off of Royalton, then keep them both, because we're still gonna, even if I supply half the town from 63 off of Royalton, if that's possible, that's still saving the town money, and I can cut people's water bills in half.
Yeah, I think you could do
Even if I pay Medina what I'm paying Medina.
right. I think you could do a lot more than that. So what, like we point out, when you're going to still serve 31 from Medina and north of 31,
Oh, yeah, we'll
you
be
could
always
serve
serving them.
essentially
Yeah.
everyone else from
Yeah.
Royalton.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're never getting away from Medina, because we have
Okay.
all of Maple Ridge Road has to be fed off of Medina. And probably East Shelby Road up, well, that's a 12-inch main, but if we do a conglomeration of both, and we're gonna not be dumping the water, because those dead ends, Freeman Road, 2.5 million gallons or whatever we're dumping. And you're right, Paul, we found a leak last year under Oak Orchard Creek. We had both valves fixed and the pipe fixed under the creek, and it was, I don't know what, roughly $65,000 a quarter in water that we were buying off Medina that was leaking into Oak Orchard Creek. So we found a bunch of them, but I'm trying to lower people's water rates. We got some of the highest water around, and if I can do it by doing this, that's going to save everybody taxpayer money, and that'll help eventually getting water on Martin Road and all these other roads, the people that want water. That's what we're looking to do here. Not cut off Medina.
Okay.
Do a hybrid system to save money. Everyone's got to cut money. So if that's what we can do, and I agree, we have to do the study, 100%. Study's got to be done. The hydraulics are right. Is this possible? Is this possible? What can we do? So I'm good. You guys got questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Now, you're talking if we service just half the west end of Shelby and shut the rest of it and everything else will come from Medina, how would the pricing be on this? If some part of the town's gonna get a cheaper rate than the rest of the town, or, I mean, how would that, I mean,
Yeah,
The town will have to
exactly,
figure
the
that
town.
out.
I mean,
But what you have to keep in mind is as Scott had mentioned, is that if you switch that part of the supply to come from Royalton, that people that are currently in that 858 pressure zone, which is the majority of the people in that area, they're gonna see a big decrease in pressure. You, you need to know that, and they need to know that, because otherwise they'll be, knocking on your door. But that would be something that would be determined in the study. Evaluate in the study just what the impact is, and I think you also, in the study, you wanna look at what would happen when you switch taking the water from the west to the east. Where would you tend to have a dead end in the system? Because you're gonna move your location of where your dead ends are in the system by doing a project of that nature. It's okay as long as you know that it's not gonna be eliminating your flushing in the system.
Do you think there would still be flushing and wasting that much water if we had to? Do you think we'd still be wasting that much water on the flushing if we had a system that was running around coming from the west to the east? You still think we're gonna have a waste of that much?
I mean, the problem is, so the current system has a certain capacity of water. There's a certain amount of water in all those pipes. There's a certain amount of water used every day. Switching where it comes from doesn't change either one of those things. So you continue to have the same water age issues. You may move where that issue is, but without adding significant demand somewhere, you haven't made a difference. You haven't changed anything, essentially. You have the same amount of water in the pipes under the ground, and you got the same amount of water coming out of those pipes serving the people.
Well, that'll make a difference on Freeman Road, because we have a dead-end 12-inch pipe that the farm's not using anymore.
Right.
And if we flush off a 6-inch pipe, that's a lot less water we're gonna be dumping on the, excuse me, a lot less water we're gonna dump on the ground than a 12-inch pipe, saving the taxpayers money.
Yeah, and, right.
I agree with you. We gotta
Yep.
do a complete study. It's gotta be done.
Yeah.
But that makes, excuse me, makes more sense to dump a 6-inch line than a 12-inch line.
Yeah.
When you have 3/4 of a mile of no houses and just a 12-inch pipe sitting with no chlorine in it. And we have to keep dumping until we don't. I'd rather dump a 6-inch than a 12-inch. That saves all of us money on our water bill. So, well, but like you said, a whole study's gotta be done, pressures and everything.
Correct.
So,
The
I
gr-
agree 100%.
I'm sorry, the grant that you said, the pre-development grant, did you say you think we would or would not be eligible for that?
It's gonna depend on what the financial statements for that. They're probably gonna wanna see that you have no money in
In
your
our water
water.
Fund,
Right.
okay.
Whether that's already earmarked for something or not, they don't seem to really care. They wanna see that it's essentially empty. You guys could not write a check that day
To pay for a study, okay.
Exactly.
And
We
then,
have a brief conversation with them before we went ahead and submitted a grant application to them. Let them know what the plan is. We've had relationships with the folks from rural development for, 40 years. Find out what their thoughts are. What they think today could have been different than what it was 4 years ago, So yeah, have that conversation with them. I'm sorry, I kind of.
nope, that's okay. Would you also be able to give us a quote for if you were to do the study for us? And would you be able to use any of the information from your previous study to kind of cut the cost down? Or do you have to kind of go recreate the wheel and do the whole thing from scratch?
Well, I don't think we'd have to recreate the wheel because we did a lot of background work associated with getting to the place that we got to. But, we would definitely need to, first of all, we need to know from you what the specific scope of work is. So that if you're gonna compare us to somebody else, that you're comparing apples to apples. I'd want to receive from the town a very specific scope of work of what you would like us to do. And then we would be glad to give you a proposal
Okay,
to identify, what our approach would be, how long it would take, what the cost would be, so on and so forth. But until I get something that tells me you want us to do A, B, C, and D, then I think we wouldn't be able to give you a fair proposal until that point. And you'd have to also think about, what do you want included in that request for proposal of grants, looking at grants or applying for grants or environmental review if necessary. Because some of those grant programs require, certain steps be completed by them. But I think it's important that if you want us to, if you wanted us to work with you, we'd be glad to work with you, first of all, as to let us know what your scope of services, your expectation would be.
So that 350 million New York put out this year, you're saying we have no chance of getting any of that?
We're not saying you have no chance. There's always a chance. Projects like this just tend to not be competitive. To tell you, based on our personal experience, I think we've got one funded in the last round, and that was they had a consent order from the Department of Health that they had to do something. We submitted a few other projects that would be similar to this. None of them scored well enough to get funded. It's not to say that this round there won't be less applications and you would fall in there, but
Were those other towns in Orleans County?
they were not.
So they weren't in the poverty county?
They were in poverty. They were all poverty, yeah, but they were not in this county.
Okay.
Now, if we service just the west end of the town out of Royalton, you still have to have a 12-inch main all the way to Royalton, the main? You wouldn't need it?
Not necessarily, no.
That, without studying it,
Yeah.
the hydraulics, we don't know for sure.
So you're not sure if
I
you,
think that's why we're saying if you want a proposal, we want to know exactly what the
Yeah.
scope of that. Are we talking about possibly looking at connecting to Royalton without maintaining the hydraulic grade line?
yeah.
Are we looking at maintaining it and not maintaining it? And all the different scenarios you guys would like to see.
Like, feel that they could pump enough water by just turning up pumps to get to the west side for us, or you don't know without doing a
From Niagara
test?
County?
Yes,
Well,
or from Royalton.
They said they can.
There's no doubt, I don't think there's any doubt that they could provide the fire flow that you need by connecting there. The question is gonna be the pressure. I don't think they're gonna just take their pressure and take it up 40 pounds to sell water, but I haven't had that conversation with them.
we would have to analyze that, yeah. Okay,
Thank you for having us.
yeah, thank you.
For us five. We've already got a contract with CPL to do this study. Do we,
I thought CPL just presented to us to give us the opportunity to decide on them.
no, we contracted with them last year, the board did, to do Water 13. They stopped doing Water 13 and said, if you're looking at Royalton, there's no reason for us to do Water 13 until we can figure that out.
But that's a separate project, isn't
Well,
it?
they sent us the email with the new scope of work to study the water flow from Royalton. That's what Jason was presenting at the last board meeting. That was his new scope of work. That, the email we got from CPL
Yeah.
was to change, to do this study that they're talking about. That was their presentation.
I understand that, but when we contracted with them, or the previous board contracted with them to do the Water District 13, and then that stopped, in my mind, that stops that contract with them, and we move on, this is a whole new project. They might have presented for that, but I would not assume that that means that we need to move forward with them. That's how I see it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They presented us with that change in the scope of work.
Correct. And
So-
now I guess this is a different presentation to get another quote from somebody else to do the same
Okay.
project.
I asked Jason Foot at the last meeting, he said he just started working on Royalton a month ago.
Yeah.
So how could there was no vote to approve anything, any expenditures for that? It had nothing to do with, Water 13 at all.
That's when you got the email from CPL. Yeah.
Nobody's questioning that
Yeah.
they sent an email about a different scope of work. I guess where Ed and I are confused, we didn't realize that there had been some decision that they got the work. That I understand they presented, but
No,
there
they
was never a
didn't- they
vote
didn't get
saying
it-
they
they
were.
didn't get anything.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so what we're asking is that what I'm asking is that MRB get looked at as a possible engineering firm for this project.
Do you want to get a bid from MRB? Or do you want to stay with CPL or get a bid from both?
I guess on the scope of the project, to be fair, I think we should get a bid from both of them.
Jeff?
Yep, I guess.
Okay. Okay, so that's what we'll do. No, this is just a bid for work. I'll come up with a proposal to study the fire, what is it? What would you want? Study the fire flows? To join with Medina? What we need to connect to supply the town? I don't want to go one water supply or the other. I want to have them both.
Right, well, we want a request for a proposal from you guys
What, yeah, how do you want me to word it? What do you want me to say in that we want?
to define the scope, that
Okay.
you want us to look at connecting to Royalton and maintaining the hydraulic grade line, you wanna look at Royalton at the lower hydraulic grade line, I guess, all the different scenarios you would like us to study and put into a report. We did get awarded the work.
Okay.
How about if I take a stab at sending you what I think of scope?
Shoot me a rough draft, yeah, that way I can,
I'll be glad to do that.
all right. You got my email, I think, right? Yeah, you got my email, yeah.
I want it to be fair, whatever.
Yeah.
Whether you hire us or you don't hire us, I want it to be a fair process.
Okay, sounds good to me. You guys good with that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll shoot out an email.
I'll draft something and send it over to.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Scott, one question. Are you going to, where the other districts that we talked about adding or looking at possibly adding during this project, are they in the Medina supply or are they in the Royalton supply?
The big thing was Sanderson Road, remember, connecting up to the water tower?
Yeah,
And then,
and wasn't there something about Bigford?
no, it
So
was,
the Martin Road
Oh,
to
Martin Road.
Bigford Road, right?
yeah, Martin to Bigford, there was that connection, and that would give us a loop around the town.
And that was included in, Jason's price also.
Yeah.
What he come up with.
Yeah,
So if that needs to be included, let's just not
Okay.
forget to
Yeah.
put that in. Oh, on
oh, yeah,
Maple Ridge.
Salt Works to Hemlock Ridge, that was the other thing, yeah. Okay, yeah. So, that was, let me write this down. Sanderson. Martin. What was the third one? Salt Works, right? Salt Works.
That would take care of those 6 houses on Maple Ridge.
Okay. That was that, and that. Okay, you guys good with that? You good with that? Okay. That one not going, this is good. Okay, we do have one resolution. It's a resolution to approve investigation into a connection with complaints from the CSEA Union and the town of Barry. Is there a motion? I'll give it to you afterwards.
I make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We'll do a roll call vote. Zelini?
No, I got a couple questions. What's this gonna cost? There's been no, price or nothing.
It's the discounted rate that attorneys provide us, $2.75 an hour or $2.85 an hour, whatever it is. They said it should be done within a week.
I'm a no.
Linda? Okay. Sites?
Yes.
Schiffer, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Schiffer, yes. And I'm a yes. So that motion's carried. What other business was there? Was that it? MRB and the resolution. What's this? Oh, okay. All right. All right. Give this to Darlene. Okay, MRB. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Do you like these?
They were very good. Thank you. Yes, got my cough.
You know who brought those to me?